What language did the Buddha speak? That's pretty basic. Now, if you ask a pious Theravada Buddhist today, if you ask one of my neighbors in Thailand, they'll be eager and quick to reply, he spoke Pali. And for them, the name Magadhi, the language of the Magadha area where he lived and did most of his teaching, is a synonym for Pali. In other words, they understand the two to be equivalent. But as we shall see, things are certainly not so simple. To begin with what we do know, it's well established that the Buddha lived in the northeastern part of the Indian subcontinent, having been born in what today is southern Nepal, and that he spent most of his teaching career in the region known as Magadha. So it does seem reasonable to suppose, as specialists do, that most of his teachings were initially delivered in some form of what more technically is called Old Magadhi, and it's referred to as Old to distinguish it from Ardha Magadhi, a much later language that was used for the transmission of scriptures belonging to the Jain tradition. But Old Magadhi was far from the only language spoken in India, or even in northern India at the time. And it seems likely that the Buddha may have been able to communicate in more than one language. And there were many other languages that scholars refer to as Prakrits. This is the first term on your handout here. It's a term that's used to refer to vernacular, that is spoken, Middle Indic languages. Prakrita can be defined as natural or unrefined, or we might even say unvarnished. Prakriti, of course, is a very famous word in Indian philosophy. And the contrast here is with Sanskrit, which is Samskrita, which is surely a word that you all know, but in different contexts. In this context, we might say it means put together, in the sense of almost decorated, made beautiful. Now, it sounds from that pair of terms as though what we're talking about is Prakrits being made into Sanskrit. And that did happen later in Indian Buddhist history. We have early texts composed in Prakrits. The oral teachings were surely in Prakrit languages, local vernaculars. And then over the course of time, again, I'm sure this is familiar to most or all of you, Sanskrit became more and more the language of choice for the transmission of Buddhist texts. So by the time the Tibetans received this tradition, Sanskrit appeared to be the normal Buddhist language. But things were much more diverse in the early period. And let me just call your attention to